matches for your particular research. Know who's on the different study sections. If you're looking at cultural competence, if that's something that's really important to you, are you going to take that grant and send it in and possibly have it go to a study section that doesn't care about cultural competence? Because some will care and some won't care. No, you need to know who's on that study section. Are there people with expertise in your particular areas? And as we'll see tomorrow, once we find what we think is the right home for our grant, the right study section where we'll get the best evaluation, we don't just keep that knowledge to ourselves. We attach a letter in which we ask for assignment to the study section that we want to evaluate our grant. This is fundamental. This is such an important decision. Know who's out there. Know who's on your study section. If you don't recognize the names, do a Medline. Find out what types of stuff have they published. If everything they've done, if they've written a review article in which they say cultural competence is a bunch of nonsense, it's something that will set science back by 20 years, don't land in that study section, right? This is common sense, and this will always, I could not overemphasize how important this is, okay? If you're a clinician, do you want that grant to go to a bunch of basic scientists who are going to say, this isn't rigorous, oh my gosh, there are so many differences that can occur between patients? No, it must go to a study section that has some clinicians on it. Control the review process insofar as you can. This is huge, in my opinion. And we'll look at that in detail tomorrow. I don't see how one can compete without getting into the right study section. Finally, learn about your competition. The NIH makes this easy. They have what's called the CRISP database. Has anyone here looked at the CRISP database? Good. So for those of you who haven't, it's a funny acronym, CRISP database, Computer Retrieval of Information on Scientific Projects. What's that mean? Here's what this means, and this is totally cool. The CRISP database includes the titles and abstracts of all grants that have been funded by the federal government for the last 25 years. So every grant that's funded, the abstract is going to have a 25-year history, shelf history, right? So you can go on there and find out who's gotten funded in your area. How did they frame issues about, let's say it's cultural competence. How did they frame it? What techniques did they use? What methods did they use? Were their grants hypothesis-driven? Was it descriptive research? How did they frame it? Look at this. It is searchable. This is one of the most valuable tools that you can use as framing your own research. Let's say you look at CRISP database and you see that there are a whole bunch of grants that are kind of similar to yours. Does that mean you can't get funded? Not necessarily. Easy example, the one that's popping into my head. Colonoscopy, virtual colonoscopy. There have to be, I don't know, 8, 10 different groups easily that are funded in the United States to come up with new means for virtual colonoscopy. It's a hot area. So the fact that there are a bunch that are out there doesn't mean you can't get funded. What it does mean is you really do, again, talk to that program officer. Make sure that there's still interest in your particular area. Summary. Planning your grant takes time. It's almost like a whole research project. If you do all these different steps I'm talking about, it becomes a research project, just planning your grant, finding out about what's the right home at the NIH, what are they interested in, who are my reviewers likely to be. It's a lot of time. There's no way to gild the lily on this. It takes a lot of time, but it's worth it in the end. This is a competitive process. It takes more research on the front end than it used to. So these are some of my suggestions for how to get going. And in conclusion, you are completely free to carry out whatever research you want, so long as you come to these conclusions. So it can seem like we're doing that. I don't think it's quite that bad, but I do think it makes sense to know what our funding agency is looking for. And before I forget, for those of you who are looking at foundations, you can do the same thing, and you should. If I were applying to a foundation, would I just look at, let's say I go into that, I go into community of science, as I recommend that some of you do, go into community of science. You look to find this foundation, you think, wow, that's just perfect for me. Would I just go off and apply? Absolutely not, no way in this world. I would start emailing that agency. I would see if, first of all, I would see if they would meet with me. They probably won't, but okay, it doesn't hurt to try. I would want to know, before I apply, what types of grants have you funded in the past? I want to know the titles to the grants. If they won't give you that information, that is publicly available information, if they won't give it to you, I would think twice before applying. Sometimes foundations wire the results. They have a single institution in mind. So be careful before you just jump into and become beguiled by some description that sounds perfect for you. Maybe, maybe not. So I'm going to open it up for questions and ask you to do like a 5-minute stretch break if you're not dying in the seats there. Is everyone still okay? Take 5 minutes while I take questions, and then we're going to start, let's see, it's what, 17 after? I'll give you 2 short breaks this morning, but it'll be easier for you. We're going to start again at, let's say, 25 after, so I'll take questions. And for those of you who need ladies' room, men's room, it's right around the corner, as Eric said. So questions.